The hearing chamber buzzed with quiet anticipation, though none expected the fireworks about to ignite between Senator Jonah Kerr, a Louisiana conservative with a deceptively mild drawl and a razor for logic, and Dr. Adrian Bellamy, a widely published postmodern theorist whose academic credentials and TED Talk popularity had earned him a glowing spotlight in progressive education circles. Dr. Bellamy had been summoned to testify about public school reform, specifically the inclusion of transformative equity frameworks in K-12 curriculum, a subject he championed as necessary, decolonization of learning systems. He entered the chamber with the composure of a man who had won debates in 10 languages, his notes stacked neatly, confident that the hearing would be a procedural win for his cause. What he didn't count on was Kerr's rhetorical strategy, which unfolded not as blunt confrontation, but as a masterclass in simplicity wielded as a weapon. It began innocently, with Kerr asking Bellamy to explain, in non-academic English, what a pedagogical refusal of colonial logic meant. Bellamy smiled, launched into a fluent monologue filled with terminology, positionality, systemic modalities, socio-linguistic detachment. But Kerr, pausing him with a gentle chuckle, said, "Professor, I asked for English, not interpretive, dance." The room stifled laughter. Bellamy blinked, recalibrated, tried again, but the cracks were visible. Each of Kerr's follow-ups was simple, clear. Should a fifth grader be told their ancestors were oppressors? Should children be graded on how well they feel or how much they know? Is truth subjective in math class? Bellamy tried to pivot, invoking Foucault and Lacan, but the moment passed. The audience had tuned into Kerr's frequency, and Bellamy's cadence began to sound like evasion rather than explanation. Then came the printout. Kerr lifted a syllabus from Bellamy's own course at Western Crescent University, reading aloud a passage that assigned students to interrogate their complicity in white logocentric frameworks. "Senator," Bellamy interrupted, "that's in the context of advanced critical theory." "Sir," Kerr replied calmly, "do you think most parents know what logocentric means, let alone why their children should be accused of weaponizing it?" The exchange gained traction in real time online, clipped, shared, dissected, woke word salad. Trended within hours. Bellamy, sensing the momentum slipping, tried to push back, accusing Kerr of oversimplifying complex systems and appealing to populist anti-intellectualism. "I'm not against intelligence," Kerr replied. "I'm against hiding confusion in fancy words." A spontaneous burst of applause broke decorum. Bellamy looked briefly stunned. The chairman called for order. But the air had shifted. Senator Kerr had seized the room not with force, but with relatable questions no expert seemed able to answer. Outside the chamber, political strategists watched with alarm. Progressive think tanks scrambled to frame the moment as an anti-academic ambush, but internally they admitted the optics were devastating. Kerr didn't yell. He didn't insult. He asked clear questions and waited. And when the answers came wrapped in metaphors, he paused, blinked slowly, and asked again. By the 8th minute, Bellamy looked less like an advocate and more like a philosopher caught off script, the scaffolding of theoretical language collapsing under the weight of everyday logic. "Do you think children should be corrected for saying America was founded in 1776? Kerr asked at one point. Bellamy hesitated, then spoke of competing narratives and indigenous temporalities. Kerr smiled. "So that's a yes, but with a time machine." More laughter. The bell rang. The segment was over, but the story was just beginning. Clips went viral. Opinion hosts on both sides weighed in. Students protested. Faculty defended Bellamy in op-eds. Kerr's office reported an unexpected flood of thank you emails from parents, teachers, and even confused college freshmen. Bellamy issued a follow-up letter clarifying his intent, lamenting that the public forum offers limited room for nuance, which only invited more critique. Kerr, when asked later if he'd do anything differently, said, "Not a thing. If it takes a PhD to explain why math's oppressive, maybe we've lost the plot." The story cemented itself not because of its controversy, but because of its clarity. One man's plain questions revealed another's complex cage. Bellamy, once a sought-after speaker, found himself the subject of late-night parodies. University donors called for transparency. Legislators drafted new bills promoting curricular clarity. And Kerr, whether you loved him or loathed him, had etched his name into a national conversation, not with fire but with light. What followed in the weeks after the now infamous hearing wasn't just fallout, it was transformation. The kind of cultural tremor that ripples into institutions, boardrooms, classrooms, and households without asking permission. And though Dr. Adrian Bellamy returned to Western Crescent University, with a stoic face and tight-lipped faculty behind him, it was clear the prestige that had once cloaked him like armor now hung loose, tattered by a single conversation that had broken the seal on a deeper public unease, one that had long been brewing beneath the surface. Was modern academia drifting too far from the very public it claimed to serve? The protests came first. Students marched in support of Bellamy, holding signs like "Truth is complex" and "Academia is not a punchline," while counter-protesters, some alumni, many parents, stood across the quad holding up syllabi, printed with passages they said read like ideology rather than instruction. Senator Kerr, meanwhile, didn't retreat into his win. He toured schools in his home state, meeting with teachers, superintendents, even students, not to mock the academic elite, but to show that educational rigor and accessibility didn't have to be enemies, and in each town hall the same questions emerged. Why is critical thinking often mistaken for critical theory? Who decides what children should feel about history before they understand it? And why do we keep funding systems that can't explain themselves clearly to taxpayers? Bellamy tried to regain footing, accepting a primetime interview with a sympathetic host, but it backfired when he referred to lay people as a challenge to institutional knowledge, prompting a swift rebuke on social media, where voters began asking whether their children's teachers viewed them with that same disdain. Faculty alliances issued joint statements defending Bellamy's scholarship, but others, quietly at first, began questioning whether the modern university had become an echo chamber insulated from democratic accountability. Booksellers reported a spike in sales of plain language history books, logic primers, and even transcripts of the hearing itself, which had been republished in full by a bipartisan think tank called the Clarity Initiative. Meanwhile, donors to Western Crescent began pulling support, demanding reforms in curriculum transparency, and insisting that tuition shouldn't fund ideological gatekeeping. The most shocking twist came from within the university itself. A group of junior faculty and doctoral candidates, many of whom admired Bellamy's scholarship, publicly advocated for a new public intellectual responsibility code, arguing that the mission of higher education was not only to produce knowledge, but to ensure that knowledge could be understood and challenged by non-experts. Bellamy called the proposal reactionary, but the damage was done. On Capitol Hill, Kerr introduced the Academic Accountability Act, a bill mandating that any course funded by federal dollars publish its full reading list and grading criteria online. An uncontroversial proposal on its surface, but one that shook higher education institutions who saw it as the first domino. And yet, for all the backlash, Kerr never gloated. When asked by a journalist if he thought he'd humiliated Bellamy, he responded, "No, ma'am. I think I reminded him, and the rest of us, that public service includes teaching, and teaching starts with being understood." The quote was etched onto the wall of a community center within days. Bellamy took a semester-long leave, citing mental fatigue, and while some hailed him as a casualty of the culture war, others saw a man who mistook applause for consensus. Meanwhile, students nationwide began filming their professors, posting clips of lectures filled with opaque jargon, some mocking, others sincere, but all asking one central question: who is this education really for? What began as a